I never thought I'd be sitting in a male OB-GYN's exam room, legs in stirrups, heart pounding as drive. Ryan Keller-esque gloved hands gently parted my thighs for the routine checkup my husband insisted I skip. The sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with his subtle cologne hit me like a forbidden memory. And in that moment of clinical proximity, something electric passed between us. His calm voice asking if I was comfortable while his fingers lingered just a second too long, awakening a heat I hadn't felt in years of my safe, predictable marriage. I told myself it was nothing. Just nerves. Just a doctor doing his job. Back home that evening, I couldn't stop replaying the appointment while cooking dinner for my husband. The memory of Dr. Keller's steady touch made my skin flush under the warm kitchen light. I stirred the sauce slowly, breath catching every time the image returned, his palm so careful, so sure. My husband kissed my cheek when he walked in, asked how my day was, and I smiled like always. But inside, the flush spread deeper. I was already wondering when I could go back. The next day I found myself scheduling a follow-up for some minor concern. My fingers hovered over the phone before I hit confirm. It was just responsible healthcare, I whispered to the empty room, even as guilt curled tight in my chest, telling me I was already seeking his presence again. I was married, happy enough. This was silly, harmless. During the second visit, his warm hand rested on my bare abdomen longer than necessary while listening for the heartbeat that wasn't there yet. I caught myself breathing in his clean, spulkulin scent mixed with latex. Slow, deliberate inhales that made the paper on the table crinkle under me. This is wrong, I thought, over and over, like a prayer I didn't believe. Yes, my doctor. I'm married. But the gentle pressure of his palm felt more intimate than anything my husband had done in months. It stirred a dangerous longing I tried to bury under moral excuses, under the soft rhythm of his voice explaining everything in that low, steady tone that wrapped around me like warm water. I shifted slightly, the stirrups cool against my skin, and his eyes met mine for a fraction longer than professional. My pulse thundered in my ears. Was that my imagination? The way his thumb brushed, just once, almost obsessively, across the curve below my navel. Heat bloomed low in my belly, uninvited, undeniable. I bit the inside of my lip to keep from making a sound. Stop. You have to stop this, but I didn't pull away. I lay there, breath shallow, letting the proximity sink in. The quiet room, the faint beep of the monitor, the way his body leaned in close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating through his coat. My mind screamed at me to think of my husband waiting at home, to remember the life we built, the promises we made. Yet my body was already leaning into the gravity of it, pulled towards something I had no name for. Just a checkup. Just his hand. Just this once. He straightened slowly, the loss of contact leaving my skin tingling. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath underwater. When he spoke again, asking if I had any other questions, his voice carried that same calm patience. But his gaze lingered on my face, searching. I shook my head too quickly, cheeks burning. No, nothing. Everything was fine, except it wasn't. Not anymore. As I dressed behind the thin curtain, fingers fumbling with buttons, I could still feel the ghost of his touch. The ache it left behind. I pressed my forehead to the cool wall for a second, whispering to myself that this was the last time. I wouldn't schedule another. I was a good wife, loyal, content, but even as I said it, I knew the like tasted sweet on my tongue. And part of me was already counting the days until I could feel that pull again. I was in the middle of the third visit when my phone rang, cutting through the quiet hum of the exam room, like a warning I didn't want to hear. My husband's voice came through on speaker, bright and unsuspecting, asking how the appointment was going, if the doctor had any updates. Doctor straightened instantly, that professional smile sliding back into place as he stepped back from the table, his hand leaving my skin with a slowness that felt deliberate. I stammered something about everything being routine, my voice too high, too thin, while heat still pulsed where his palm had rested. The call ended, but the air between us stayed thick, charged with what had almost lingered. That night at home I moved through the kitchen like a ghost, chopping vegetables while my mind replayed every second. My husband laughed on the phone with his friend in the next room, joking about how women's doctors could get a little to hands why sometimes, how he hoped mine was one of those types with a reputation. The words landed like cold drops on warm skin. I froze, knife hovering, a strange seed of suspicion sprouting even as an unexplained warmth bloomed low between my legs again, pulling me toward memories I had no right to keep. I told myself it was nothing, just talk. But my body remembered the weight of his attention. Weeks blurred into a rhythm I couldn't break. Necessary visits became almost weekly, each one wrapped in excuses about spotting or fatigue that sounded reasonable enough when I said them out loud. I'd sit in the waiting room, heart knocking against my ribs every time his voice drifted from behind the closed door with another patient. The sound of it sent tiny sparks racing under my skin. At home, I played the dutiful wife perfectly, smiling across family dinners, passing the salt, asking about his day while my thoughts drifted to the questions I planned to ask Drive. Keller next time, questions about my cycle that stretched far beyond anything medical. The facade held, thin and trembling. One afternoon the room felt smaller than usual when he prepared for the internal ultrasound. The probe slid in with careful slowness as he narrated every movement in that low, soothing tone that wrapped around my nerves like silk. His free hand rested steady on my hip, anchoring me while the cool gel met my heated skin and sent waves crashing through me, unwanted yet impossible to ignore. I screamed at myself inside, calling it just a procedure, just science, just his job. But my body betrayed me with a slick, aching need that made my breath hitch. Thoughts of what his touch might feel like without the barrier flooded in, hot and shameful. I was married. This was wrong. Yet the gravity of his nearness pulled harder than any promise had made. I lay there fighting the surrender, teeth pressed into my lip to stay silent, while the monitor's soft rhythm filled the space between us. His fingers adjusted with precision, each shift sending fresh tremors I tried to name as clinical. Stop wanting this, I begged myself. Think of the life waiting outside these walls, the man who trusts you completely. But the hunger only deepened, a storm building behind my closed eyes, leaving me breathless and divided right down the middle. He paused then, eyes lifting to mine with a quiet intensity that made the room tilt. The almost moment stretched, heavy with everything unsaid, his hand still warm against me. A sudden knock rattled the door like a warning I refused to hear. My heart slammed against my ribs as Drive. Keller pulled back sharply, his warmth vanishing from my skin in one swift motion. I yanked the thin sheet higher, fingers trembling, face flooding with heat that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with being caught mid-breath. Something about a chart mix-up, polite but insistent. He answered calmly, that steady professional tone wrapping around the moment like nothing had nearly happened. I lay there frozen, pulse echoing in my ears, the almost touch still burning where his hand had rested seconds ago. Towel slung over his shoulder, talking casually about bumping into Drive. Keller at the weights. Nice guy, he said, popping open a beer. Real charming with the women there, you know? Staff seemed to hang on every word. A strange flicker twisted inside me, jealousy sharp as a pin, mixed with a secret electric thrill that I was the one he'd been so careful with in the quiet dimness of that room. I smiled too brightly, stirring pasta on the stove while my mind replayed the way his breath had brushed close, warm and steady. I shouldn't crave knowing that side of him. I was married. Safe, yet the contrast made my husband's familiar laugh feel suddenly distant, almost hollow. The appointments started pulling me like gravity I couldn't fight. I told myself they were necessary, just monitoring, but my closet choices betrayed me. I slipped into softer lingerie beneath my clothes, lace that whispered against my skin when I moved, telling myself it was only for confidence. I arrived early, lingering in the waiting area just to catch the low murmur of his voice with other patients, the sound sending tiny sparks racing beneath my surface. Home blurred into gray routine's laundry. Small talk over dinner, my husband's hand brushing mine without the same spark. Those stolen minutes alone with Jolcher. Keller in the exam room felt vivid, alive, colored with attention that left me breathless long after I left. One visit stretched longer than planned. The room felt hushed, the hallway radio playing some soft, slow song that drifted in like an unwanted witness. His fingers moved with careful precision under the guise of checking for anything irregular, the rhythmic pressure building slow and deliberate. heat pooled low and insistent, pulling a soft gasp from my throat before I could swallow it. My hand flew up instinctively, fingers wrapping around his wrist, not pushing away, just holding. Suspended there, the faint, clean scent of his skin filling my lungs, the moral line it clung to cracked wide open. I whispered it before I could stop myself, voice barely there, trembling with shame and need. "Don't stop." The words hung between us, raw and irreversible. My pulse thundered so loud I was sure he could hear it. He didn't pull back immediately, his eyes meeting mine with that same quiet intensity that made everything tilt. The song from the hallway swelled for a second, wrapping around the silence like a confession neither of us voiced. I was supposed to be the good wife. I was supposed to be the good wife, the careful one. Instead, I lay there divided, craving the very thing that could ruin everything, the ache deepening with every shared breath we refused to break. My phone buzzed sharply against the side table, the vibration slicing through the thick silence like an unwelcome intruder. I glanced down, heart stuttering at the name glowing on the screen. My husband, asking when I'd be home for dinner, the words so ordinary they felt like a slap. Dr. Varv. Keller's hand stilled where it had been, warm and steady just moments before, and he pulled back with a conflicted shadow crossing his eyes, jaw tightening as if the message had reached him too. We didn't speak of it. Not then, but the air between us thickened, heavy with everything we hadn't allowed to happen. I dressed quickly, fingers fumbling with buttons that suddenly felt too small, the fabric clinging to skin still humming from his nearness. Whispers floated from the front desk as I passed. Soft comments about his attentive style with certain patience, the way some women lingered longer than necessary. Paranoia bloomed hot in my chest, yet the memory of his touch lingered like a secret brand, searing through every familiar gesture my husband offered later that night. His arm around my waist at the kitchen counter felt pale, distant, a safe echo that couldn't match the electricity still crackling under my skin. The visits became my hidden rhythm, pulling me back despite the guilt that gnawed deeper each time. 2 weeks blurred by in a haze of excuses to myself. Another appointment, intense and unspoken, left me rambling in the parking lot afterward, uncertain where my body ended and the craving began. I told no one. How could I? Home life continued in muted tones. My husband's excited plans for the weekend, his hands seeking mine across the dinner table. I smiled, nodded, all while the faint antiseptic scent clung to my clothes like evidence I couldn't wash away. Then came the morning that shattered the fragile balance. I stood in our bathroom, the door locked against the world, staring at the positive pregnancy test in my shaking hands. 2 pink lines, stark and undeniable. The room spun gently, the ghost of that last exam room visit pressing close. The way his presence had filled the space, careful yet charged. My husband's voice drifted from the living room, bright and hopeful, calling out to ask if everything was okay, if I needed anything. I couldn't answer right away. My mind reeled with the devastating possibility hanging there, unspoken, that this child might carry traces of forbidden gravity, not the safe love waiting just beyond the door. Dr. Keller's number sat and sent in my phone, thumb hovering over the screen as desire still burned low and unresolved, a fire refusing to die. I wanted to tell him, needed to, but terror and that dark thrill twisted together, leaving me frozen, the test slipping slightly in my damp palm. Now I sit here alone in the quiet hours, hand resting lightly on my still flat belly, the phantom texture of ultrasound gel a cool echo against my skin from that final check. The moral weight presses down like a storm cloud that never breaks, crushing me with what I've risked, what I almost surrendered to. Yet the intensity of those stolen moments refuses to fade. The warmth of proximity, the breath that almost crossed lines, the pull that felt like drowning in something alive and dangerous. My husband hums softly in the next room, dreaming of fatherhood, while I wrestle this suspended longing that won't let go. Terror coils tight with an intoxicating thrill I can't name, the ache raw and persistent, a hunger that echoes in the silence. What happens next? I don't know. But the pull remains, haunting and unresolved, whispering that some cravings never truly end.